Hello and welcome to the new tutorial series where I'm going to be teaching you how to basically build your own application in Python. And so for this example, I'm going to be assuming that you've never had any programming experience before, and we're going to be going over how we can make a simple program that will email out basically maybe you want to set up like an automatic emailer, or you want to automatically email like a bunch of people like your resume or something. So the tools we're going to be using is, first of all, the programming language we're going to be using is Python. So the latest version is Python 3.9, but anything 3.7 or newer should be good enough. You can just download it from python.org. Some computers will already come with Python, for example, Mac computers, and as well as if you're running Linux, which if you are, you probably already know what you're doing. But regardless, some computers already come with Python, so you can test that out by typing Python 3 in your terminal, which I'll show you later. Basically, you want to install Python 3.7 or newer. For my examples, I'm probably going to be using somewhere like 3.7 or 3.9 or 3.10, which isn't out yet because the latest version is 3.9, but I am currently testing the pre-release version. But it doesn't matter what version you're using, as long as it's something 3.7 or newer, you should be good to go. The second thing you're going to want is a code editor. So personally, I use Visual Studio Code, so if you don't have one, you should probably just install this one because it's easy, and that's what I'm going to be using for all the examples. But you can use Notepad or TextEdit. Whatever default editor is already built into your computer, that is perfectly fine. You don't have to install anything new. And there are also other alternatives that you can look at if you want to go exploring. So one thing to note is when you're installing Python, I just grabbed the screenshot off the internet, but basically, if you're installing Python and, for example, you're on Windows, or maybe you have an installer, there's going to be this checkbox at the bottom that says Add Python to Path. It's going to be unchecked by default, so you're going to actually want to check that box before you finish installing. And that's one thing to note, because otherwise you won't be able to use the Python command without some, mangling, basically adding it to your path, which we're not going to go over because this installer should just automatically do it for you. You may need to restart your computer after you install it, of course. Next, we're going to be looking at, so for this video actually, we're going to be looking at setting up your environment. So we're not even going to be doing any coding for this video. And so the website I'm looking at right now is github.com. This is just open to my profile, but what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create an account. So, the sign up button's on the top right, the usual. And you're going to want to install a tool called Github Desktop. So actually, many, I guess, one way to organize your code is to be able to keep track of like your old changes. And we can do that through this command called git, G-I-T. And that's what GitHub is basically. It's a website for, keeping track of Git for you. It's basically like a cloud server, and it's owned by Microsoft. But we're not going to be using the command line for that because we want to keep things simple. And so you can download this tool instead, which will do all the work for you behind the scenes. You just have to click some buttons and it'll just do it for you, which we'll also go over as well. Okay, so now that you've gotten everything set up, you're going to want to open the GitHub website, which I have open over here to my personal account. And you're going to want to go to the top right and click plus and then new repository. This will allow us to create a new repository on the cloud server, which will be able to synchronize our changes every time we make them, so we can keep track of them. In case we write some code that doesn't actually work, we can just revert back to the old change. And so for this one, you can put any name you want. I'm just going to call it tutorial emailer because that's simple. Public or private doesn't really matter. Of course, maybe you want code to be private. That's up to you. And then over here, there's some extra options. I'm going to check add git ignore, and then there's templates, and I'm going to add Python. This is going to allow me to prevent me from uploading too much random crap to the online server, because there's some stuff that we just don't need to include. And then we're going to click create repository. So we'll give this a quick second, and it should create what the file that we asked for, which is the git ignore, which I'll go over what that is later. But basically, you're just want to click this green down arrow and then click open with GitHub Desktop. And see, it's open with GitHub Desktop. I'm just going to click clone, and it'll download it to my computer. It'll create this new folder, which in a couple seconds I can click show in Explorer, or for example on Macs it'll be show in Finder. But basically, I'm looking at the wrong folder. Let's click this again. Here we go. And so we'll just have this git ignore file, and that's basically all we need. And so other computers, will look different, but basically it's going to create this folder called tutorial emailer. You can see here I have it in D repositories tutorial emailer. Obviously on your computer, by default, it should show up in your documents folder. And so for example, on Mac, it'll be like home documents and then / like tutorial emailer or something like that. Maybe / GitHub folder or something. But basically it's going to store it as some folder on your computer, which you can easily find by clicking the show in Explorer or show in Finder button on GitHub Desktop. So I'm going to close this for now. we're actually going to open the terminal. And so you can open the terminal by finding it in your search bar or whatever. On Windows computers, this probably be called command prompt, and on other computers probably be called like terminal, or maybe like terminal emulator or something. But it doesn't really matter. What we actually care about now is using some commands. And see, I'm gonna see if I can try to make this bigger. I'll also make this larger for you to see. Okay, and so for this, we actually want to use the cd command. CD stands for change directory, and we're going to go to the folder where we created our tutorial Linux, or not tutorial Linux, but like our tutorial folder, wherever we cloned it. And so for me, we saw that was D, repositories, and then tutorial emailer. Okay, and so now we're in this folder. Okay, a command that you can use for Linux computers and macOS computers is ls. Here I also have it bound. But for Windows computers, you actually want to use the command dir. It's the same thing. Basically, it lists the files that you're in, and you'll be able to see that there's a .gitignore file, which will allow us to see that we can be prepared to make edits to this or whatever. We also want to be able to make sure that we have Python, so we're going to type Python, and I'm going to see I have here at version 3.7.7. On some computers, you may want to use the command Python 3. So macOS computers especially, and Linux computers, Python 3. But for me, I'm just going to use Python. And then we're going to want to use the -m for modules. So we're going to run a Python module. And the module we're going to run is called venv, which stands for virtual environment. And then the name after that, we just want to name our virtual environment, which I'm just going to call it venv again, because I don't really need a special name for it. And we'll just give it a couple seconds, and then it will run. And this basically create a folder where we can, install extra Python modules that will allow us to, do extra stuff with, which can be anything. We can create our own modules or install modules on the internet, but these modules won't go outside of our folder or repository. And so on Windows, in order to activate your virtual environment, you're going to want to do /venv scripts activate. On macOS, it'll be slightly different. You're going to want to type the command source, and then this, bin slash, and I think sources /activate or something like that. I will write the full command in the description. But for macOS and Linux computers, you're going to want to put source in front of it, and either way, you can use the command in the description, and you'll end up with this venv on the left side. And yeah, so that's going to basically conclude this video. After this, you should have everything set up, and things should be good to go.